Hello, welcome to How to RPG. My name is Fred Wheeler, and you can see in front of you players' handbooks from various versions of Dungeons and Dragons. So what you can see here is the 5th edition player's handbook, the 4E player's handbook, and the 3.5. So I'm going to be pulling from all of these. I will be pulling from other books as well. I have another one that I have sort of off to the side, and there are some more that I will be utilising in the future. It probably won't help me today because this is complex combat mechanics. So I'm going to put up a poll. Feel free to grab some food, some drink, make sure you are comfortable. And today is sort of behind the scenes and breaking down complex combat mechanic. Dice rolling maybe, or just concepts. This is sort of where my head is at for today. That's the thing I want to cover. And I'll do my best to do this for you, reasonably efficiently. But I'm going to show you all of the stuff that I prepared in the past for 5e, and we'll be expanding on that and going beyond 5e for today. So yeah, get yourself ready, and I hope that you will come along with me and join in the discussion, because there's lots to talk about. There's lots of things that sort of make a game more interesting and less interesting. But anyway, I should be able to get through this hopefully. Oh my gosh. Okay, here we go. Hi, welcome to How to RPG. My name is Fred Wheeler, and today it's all about tabletop role-playing game rules. And what I want to focus on with regard to a tabletop role-playing game is complex combat mechanics. These are things that we haven't really covered before. These are the things that, frankly, could be considered variant options, or they could be considered necessary depending on the rule system you're playing. So all the things that we haven't covered before, I'm going to be covering today. And I'm going to show you everything that I have. I have a poll running. Feel free to take part in that or not take part in that. It's up to you. I'm going to be shuffling over to my documents fairly quickly, but I'll make sure I have my phone up and ready. It's actually really hot here today, and it's just rained and then stopped raining. So I am probably going to have to open the door and ditch the hat. I just don't think I'm going to survive. Otherwise, it's going to be just too much. And I'll make sure that everything is hopefully doing its thing. So just bear with me while I transition over to the screen I want to show you. I have to make a copy of everything. Don't let me forget. I don't want to destroy these. I just want to appropriate them for a different purpose now. And if this isn't big enough, you'll let me know. So let's transition this over. And that's there. And I will be checking the chat from time to time because I want your feedback. Now let me just open this door. Oh, okay. Now, a few of you are probably going to be asking me, Fred, do you have access to Advanced Dungeons and Dragons 1st Ed Edition and 2nd Ed Edition? And as of last night, I do have access now to the Player's Handbook for 1st Ed Edition Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. It's very delicate. I don't think it's going to help us for today. And I also now have the Advanced Dungeons & Dragons 2nd Ed Edition Player's Handbook. It did not come in the package looked pretty badly damaged, unfortunately. I'm hoping the books aren't too badly damaged as a result of that. All of these books have been sent to me by patrons and subscribers of the channel who wanted to help me expand the channel and do other things, and this is exactly what I wanted to do in the first place, so they've made that possible. The hat has got to go. I apologise. Let me go to chat and let's have a look what we got here. H Bookbinder DM, hello. My in-person game was cancelled this evening due to freezing rain. Oh dear. But that means I can join you. Well, I'm glad you were able to join me, Bookbinder. Brother. Now, I'm going to get this name wrong, so you're going to have to help me with this. Brother Malachi? Is it Malachi? Brother Malachi? Can't really sneak attack if you can't get into the get in the side or rear, can you? Well, I think that I think people misunderstand the concept of sneak attack. I think they've got a preposition to thinking that sneak attack can only really be performed unless you're doing it behind, or you're not in front, or that they don't know you're coming. Like sneak attack can only be because it's called sneak attack, right? Sneak attack, where it's probably not a good wording for sneak attack. It probably just needs to be reworded to something else. Malachi. Okay, got it. Well, theoretically, from the frontier. Well, yes, but then again, let's remember that. Let's remember movies aren't necessarily an indication of reality. So I think, and also we're playing a fantasy game too. I think that the concept of sneak attack is really that you're trying to get into a position that's going to give you an advantage and find a vulnerable point. Okay, I think that's really all it's trying to do. You reckon? Malarkey. Malarkey. No, that's right. No, Malarkey. I got it. All right. So let's show you what I have here. I'm going to show you my Google slides for the Dungeons and Dragons 5e rules that I put together for complex combat mechanics. I'm also going to show you the Google document, which I read from, that nobody has access to. I mean, you will have seen these previously. I'm going to make a copy of them. I need to make sure I rename them correctly, because otherwise I'll never find them again. Yeah, okay, so sometimes there's too many things that I've put together, and I need to just find stuff again. So what I might do is I might just open this one here, and I can just do a transfer over, hopefully, which will solve a lot of my problems with this one. And so we need to make a copy of this. You will get to see the whole presentation, don't you worry. It's just, I want to make sure that when I do this, I'm not destroying what I've made before, because it may come in useful in the future. Now, so complex combat mechanics, and this is for tabletop games, and it's not going to be lesson 2, it'll be lesson 3, because lesson 4 is magic, so that makes sense. We got that in. If I made a copy of this, I hope I have. And you don't need to feel sorry. It's me struggling with the pronunciation of a name. That's really all it is. Okay, so this has got to go. And then that document there, I need to rename as well, but I'll make a copy of it as well. And we'll get rid of that name. And I believe if I just title it exactly the same as the last one, combat, complex combat, dear. I'm curious, how many people here have had actual training in either warfare or fighting, boxing, martial arts, some sort of combat training? I mean, it's not necessary to be able to figure out this sort of stuff ultimately, but it does help to give you an idea of where you're at. We always assume a lot of our role-playing games like they are a real indication of what's going on in a battle, when really they're not. They're just an abstraction of that. Okay, so let me rename this, and I'm hoping that I get it right. Actually, I can just go all the way back, can't I? Because it should come out exactly the way I want it if I do that. And then we just paste. No formatting. Okay, so tabletop plan, That's almost correct. This is where I've got unstuck a few times when I've gone back and I haven't changed the titles and stuff. So I'm making sure I do all of that this time around. Otherwise, I get so lost amongst everything. So that's that one. We'll leave that one, and then we'll come over here and make sure I've done the same thing here. The key is more like a P. Oh, okay. But with a K instead of a P. Pi. Kai. 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 All right. You took martial arts about 2 years in the army, never spent time in the front, so mileage for my comments may vary. No, that's fine. Not some high-speed spec op vet or something like that. That's fair enough. That's cool. Nope, just running from bullies as a child. So I did a lot of running from bullies as a child too, as it happens, which is why I wound up being sent to learn karate and martial arts by my grandmother, actually. She got so concerned that I was getting hurt. Tabletop role-playing game rules, I think it is. But we will check to make sure I've got that right. I'm going to show you everything I've done in the past. I shouldn't have closed that so soon. I should have made sure I got this right. In fact, maybe I should just leave it open so that I can see what I'm doing. That might be the smartest way. Don't know what's going on here. We will scroll on down to there. Okay, now I know. Now I know. It's just not updated it. Okay, so that's the format that I need to follow. Okay, that shouldn't be too hard. Tabletop role-playing game rules, and we've got that there. We're going to get rid of this. We don't need this bit. Plan we can get rid of. I'm going to get rid of some of the images here, and I'm going to go through and then give you... We're actually not going to... I'm not going to rip out as much as you might think. If anything, we're going to be adding stuff. What Dungeons & Dragons 5e does is a small aspect of what a lot of other role-playing games do, right? So it's actually going to wind up building on top of this rather than stripping it back more. Which is strange because usually that's what I've wound up doing when I've been doing this is I've been stripping things back rather than putting things in. That's not always the case, but yeah, it's definitely going to be what will happen here today. So this is the image I'm going to use and I'll put it to the back. Okay, right, just so that I know where I am. Okay, so the old slideshow, we had an overview and it was really about hiding, the ready to action, grappling, shoving, cover, and death, character death. That was really the gist of it, with the intention that I knew I was going to have to build on in the future. The reality is, like, how much in terms of complex combat mechanics do you actually think needs to be there? So I'm going to ask you that question in the comments section. I'm going to type it in now so you can sort of have a look at that while I'm ruminating here and pulling stuff out before we start putting more in. Far from being a master, but I can usually tell bullshito from a visiting a gym or a dojo. Spent more time speaking, to be honest. Okay, was too big to run proper. All right, okay. Yeah, well, that's training, right? So here we go. So I don't practice anymore. I'm ill-equipped. I'm getting too old. When I hurt myself, it takes forever to repair, like sometimes years. So I had to eventually just give it up. And also too, I'm just not fit enough to be able to do that. I don't even have enough time. There's a lot of time required. Anyway, hashtag what complex or advanced combat mechanics do you think a role-playing game needs? That'll be my question to you. All right, so I'm not going to play with this just yet. Instead, I'm just going to rip out a few images that I don't want to have there anymore, that belong to Wizards of the Coast, because I don't want to use their stuff if I can help it. and I will replace them with something else in the future. So one of the reasons, and you're probably wondering, why did I put hide action? When I say hide, I kind of mean like sneaking, stealthing, infiltration, that sort of stuff. Normally, that's going to be outside of combat. But, I mean, 5e and other role-playing games do allow you to do it inside of combat as well. But stealth and hiding and stuff like that is usually far more useful to you outside of combat rather than as part of combat. So it's probably one of the disconnects that you've had if you've been dealing with 5e and the hide action. I'm going to need to delete. I'll leave that image there, that's fine. This is that. I'll get rid of this. And unfortunately, a few people seem to understand that the concept of hiding and being hidden, if you start pulling in things like facing, I'm not using D&D Beyond anymore, so that's why I'm taking that out. It's not getting replaced by, I mean, it's a blank panel that I can use if I want to and copy and so forth, but my intention is not to put a sponsor there, if you were wondering, because I don't have a sponsor for it. This is definitely D&D, their image, so they can go. I will place it with something else, probably from real life. Something with a nice high resolution image would be good. Paste. So when I say hide, I want to sort of amend this to, let's just go down to here. So when I mean hide, I mean stealth. Well, that's not going to help me, is it? Just try to capital stealth and hide. That's really where I'm at. This is what I'm trying to get at. It's like that sort of aspect in your combat. And if I go over here, which is, let's do this now. Plan for tabletop role-playing game rules. Okay, and then it's part 3, complex there, we've got that. So let's go down here. So I'm going to come back to this. I'm going to really drill down into this a lot more than I have here, because you can see that was my notes. This program for 5e was designed not to give you detail. It was designed to give you the simplest communication of the idea. Okay, and which is fine. But for the purposes of this program and what it's planning to do in the future, it's not going to do us any good. So really what this is about is stealth, sneak, and hide. Okay, and really what we're looking at here is stealth, sneak, hide, and infiltration. Infiltration. To be continued. We'll come back to this. I just want to see what the chat is saying. Something to keep combat from getting too boring. Yeah, that's true. Combat gets boring because you can have very few rules and it not be boring, provided that players actually come up with interesting ideas and the dungeon master or game master are prepared to adjudicate it in some way. Something other than you just hit or you don't. That generic stuff gets real boring real fast. And I agree, it does. So you can have, with a very low crunch game, you can have a lot of complexity and tactics involved. I heard the best way is to describe your attacks. Absolutely, I think that's a good idea. And then once you've described your attack, then you get your game master to adjudicate how it's going to be determined. I don't know if you want to watch it, but I think Seth Shawalski did a video on that recently, how to keep combat interesting. Everybody makes a video on this. Seth is not the only one. He said exactly the same things that everybody else has ever said, because everybody says exactly the same thing generally. Okay, there are a gazillion videos. there were, I hate to say it, but yes, no, I will say it. Like 7 years ago, there were videos before Seth did his video. Now, Seth does good stuff. Don't get me wrong, but because he's only doing like a video once a week, he's going to get around to these topics very, very slowly. So there's plenty of advice on how to do that. Tripping, disarming, maybe. Now, that's actually a good point. And your point there, Bookbinder DM, tripping, I want to put this under shoving, because it kind of falls into the same bracket. And I guess, how can I describe this without confusing everybody? Let me just do this, because I think of the shove, not the shave, the shove, in a couple of different ways. So I'm sort of jumping around based on what you've put in here, and I think that might be a little bit helpful to us. No, do that. Put a number in it. Okay, so this is, so when you think about the shove action, I want you to think about this. Throwing somebody and shoving somebody, they kind of fall into the same thing. If you've ever done judo or any kind of throwing and grappling and so forth, you'll understand they kind of fall into the same place. So throwing, tripping, because when you throw, you're often having to trip somebody, and shove. Throws often consist of a trip to unbalance and shove to put them down. So they actually all fit together quite nicely. The judo concept of throwing, being trip and shove. Because the trip is basically to debalance them. You're trying to find a way to use leverage so they lose their balance. That's the basics around it. Hello, Overboard. How are you doing? Overboard is a patron and also a moderator. He has a YouTube channel that does miniatures, dice, terrain, a lot of terrain and reviews. And he's worth checking out if you're interested. How's it going, Joe? Okay, now, you also said disarm. And disarm is one of those things which has become codified. So you can only disarm somebody if you have a specific feat or you're a specific class in 5e. And disarm, I feel, is something that shouldn't need to be that. And it's actually not on my list. So guess what? I'm adding it to the list. I'm going to add it to the list. So disarm. An opponent. Opponent. Come on, Fred. Opponent. Okay. So I've done this, and we will put a number in here now. Disarming. Come back to disarming. Disarming is a special type of attack. So doing a disarm could be as easy as using the attack action, but you're doing something more with it. Now, whether it's easier for you to do or harder for you to do, however your dungeon master might adjudicate it, I mean, that's not my business really, okay? But let's talk about disarming an opponent, because I think it's a good topic, and it certainly falls under complex combat mechanics. So good move on there. I like that. That's great. Now, I am falling behind on my chat. Let's see. Yeah, I have done D&D since 4th, so I'm not sure if fighter feats are still a thing or not. If there are fighter feats, there are at least fighting feats in 5e. And 3.5 had fighting feats. You've played Pathfinder? I have too. Still my favourite edition, but they did melee classes dirty at times. They definitely had a magic bias. So one of the things to understand is that it's quite intentional that at low level martials are stronger than spellcasters and more likely to survive. That's deliberate, and that kind of goes with the concept of magic. The biggest dirty that you're talking about with regard to marshals is actually maybe not the thing you were thinking of. Do you know what the problem is? And I think the problem is, now the readied action, this is interrupts. So I'm going to describe this as interrupts, people. It's really interrupt and disrupt. So, interrupt. Oh, come on. Get it back into capitals, sorry. Interrupt. And ready. And ready. That's a Pathfinder image. So I think we're going to get rid of, what I will do is I will get rid of the ready. Because when you think ready, do you really understand what that is? Interrupt actions. Really, that's what we're talking about, is an interrupt action. Or interrupt act. Let's put it as an act. There we go. I'm keeping Pathfinder, leaving that there. That's all good. Now, we'll come back to this. This is something else to talk about a little bit later. So let's go back to, where was I? The readied action. I'll put this in here. And this is going to be the ready. I've got to change the... Okay, there we go. Ready. We'll put a number beside it. And like so. And underline this. So, ready. No, sorry, interrupt. Interrupt and interrupt, disrupt, and ready. Actions. X. There we go. We're going to go into that in a bit more detail. Now, going down here. So yes, that with marshals need to have more utility things they did, because all they ever got were the ability to fight in combat more effectively, or more options, armor, weapons, stuff like that, which is all very well, but no. Large group combat mechanics. Large group combat mechanics is not usually a role-playing game. You play with the tabletop wargaming is that. I think trying to duplicate large group combat mechanics, I know where you're coming from here, this mass combat concept, but mass combat is not suitable for a role-playing game. I know people want to include it, but having come from a tabletop wargaming background, playing Warhammer and 40k, I can tell you now, it doesn't fit well. It's a complete opposite to what you're trying to do with a role-playing game, which is to play one individual and play through their journey. Do you know what I mean? Whereas the other thing is, it's about commanding armies. Really, that's what it is commanding armies. But then, people put it in, they're never really any good, and frankly, I don't think it's worth including, in my opinion. Actually, maybe that's what I should say. Because this is one of the problems with role-playing games, is they always try to duplicate what can be duplicated with a, I guess, what would be the word for this? It can be duplicated with a different system that can't really be achieved very, very effectively any other way. So let's put in an entry for that. Mass combat or mass combat or large scale battles. And I will actually put in a slide for it. How's that sound? Now, you may disagree with the fact that I've just said it's not really suitable in a role-playing game. That's fine. You just ignore that bit of what I'm talking about. Not really suitable for a character-driven role-playing game. Better to use a different system. Which is why with the new Dragonlance for 5e, they put out a sort of a game that was different from the role-playing game for that very purpose. It's because it can't duplicate it very effectively. So let me just make a slide for that. That won't be too much of a pain. I can probably just duplicate this. So if I go copy, and I'll put it after death, paste it here. And now that it's here, I will call it mass combat. Mass combat. And I'm just going to take a lot of this out here, because none of that's going to be appropriate to say anything about for now. And I probably should make sure I don't forget to put in somebody mentioned disarming, and I put in disarming after cover. Do I want to put disarming somewhere else? Maybe I do. Let's put that, cut it, and we'll put it after throwing. We'll put it here, before cover. Okay, all right, that's better. Okay, so I need to work through this chat a lot faster than I have been. Good one. Both GMs and players struggle with that. I know Matthew Colville was working on books to simplify that. Yeah, so if you're probably best, if you're going to do mass combat, is to do it narratively. This is the advice you always get on the internet, is do it narratively or use a different system. And there's nothing stopping you from going from a role-playing game, and then when you want to have your players being generals in an army and controlling a massive army of different troops, assign them a unit that they control, and they may not necessarily be fighting the front line, but they are controlling the units that do the fighting for them, and they're giving the commands. And that might be a good way of playing that out. If you're going to do mass combat and you use an actual mass combat tabletop wargaming system, they're not as complicated as you might think, and frankly, they're very heavy on terrain and miniatures. So if you're going to do them, it's kind of much easier to do it terrain and miniatures. Otherwise, go narrative. Like, that's the next easiest way to deal with that. Okay. Now. An old 3rd edition rule I was fond of, even though it can slow down the game, is having your AC be a D20 plus modifier instead of a flat 10. It makes you actually feel like you're trying to avoid strikes. Okay, so what you're talking about here, and actually that's something I want to discuss as well. So we've got disarming, throwing, tripping, shoving. Disarming an opponent. So let me just make sure I have this where it needs to be. I can just do a copy of this again, and I just put a title in. Where are you? Shoving, cover. Here we go. So it should be here. Paste this here, and what we're talking about here is disarming. Disarming. Opponents. And we'll make this a little bit smaller, and we'll stretch, we will stretch you, and that's not too bad. We just need to shrink it a little bit, get that out of the way. Okay, cool. So disarming opponents. Right, now before I get lost, you had mentioned something, and this doesn't come up that often. You find it in 5e, for example, and not all systems. They talk about blocking and parrying. Some systems have an attack and defense system rather than a static number. So that's what I think you're talking about here. So I'm going to paste this here, and I'm going to put this in. Disarming opponents. Block Block and parry. Block and parry. Very, very simple. We'll put that in there, right there. That's fine. Block and parry. And parry. And different game systems do this differently, but an incoming attack or back question mark, and then I will put here parry or deflect and attack at range or in melee, because both could happen. Whether this gets tied to a specific class or whether it's just something that anybody can do in the game for your role-playing game, like, you know, it's kind of up to you. I don't really have a particular bent for this. It's sort of whatever works for you. This is not really what this whole thing is about. I'm not here to tell you how to do it. I'm here to tell you how to do it, if you want to do it. That's what my head is at. Okay. So, avoiding strikes. That, I think, was what you were talking about. Instead of just trying to stand there. Yes, yes, yes. On using shove a lot. That one. Shoving, yeah. Well, shoving only works under certain circumstances, but we'll get back to that. Not sure if I can call it the same, but similar enough in game-wise mechanics. Yeah, I think it is. I think what you're trying to do is it is still sort of a defensive technique. All right, what do you got here, Joe? I just added another copy of Broken Weave to my Kickstarter page. I'll send it to you after I receive it, unless they let me ship it to you directly. Okay. What are you working on, Joe? Just another Broken Weave. Okay, all right. Yeah, well, you know how to get hold of me, Joe. You know my email address is in the About section of my YouTube channel. You know how to get hold of me. Holding your turn until another person acts. Okay, so you're talking about delay. And there's a reason why the designers of 5e ditched delay. Because delay comes into play because people are unsure what to do, and because the order of turns dictates what will happen next. And delay is, I hate to say it, it's a necessary evil for players who are trying to do something. But the reality is, if you look at how the game rules could be set up to solve that, it shouldn't be an issue. Do you know why it's an issue? I'll tell you why it's an issue. It's an issue because somebody stupid decided to write the rules a particular way, and they did not consider the possibility that actually maybe we don't need to have the ready action look that way. The ready action 5e is what causes the problem. And there's attempts to sort of fix that. Now, where is the ready to action? Okay, here we go. The interrupt. Do you know why in 5e the interrupt and disrupt concept, people keep asking for the delay for the ready to action, and then they don't want to use the ready to action because they can't use their full turn as part of the ready to action. If the designers of 5e had actually just said, you can take the ready to action and take your turn, might have to specify what you're going to do, but you can take your turn at a certain point when somebody else is doing something, it would have solved the whole problem. You know, 5e was trying to make the idea of everybody delaying and trying to track it in initiative being a huge problem, having to move people in the initiative order. So first off, when you use like a disrupt or a delay or a ready, it shouldn't change your position in the initiative. It doesn't need to. It's only a temporary thing for that one round. After that, we can go back to the initial initiative. So I use what's called group initiative in my game. And so what that means is if 2 or 3 of the players have got a higher initiative than me, the game master, then they just take their turn in whatever order they like. I don't give a toss. It doesn't matter. Who gives a shit? I mean, ultimately, it doesn't matter as far as I'm concerned, as long as only those 3 players get to go before my monsters go, right? And then whoever got lower the initiative than the monsters, the game master or dungeon master, they go after. Now, there might be 2 or 3 of them as well, and they can go in whatever order they like. It doesn't matter. When we've finished the whole round, then we just go back to the top and we use exactly the same initiative. So there's no necessity to have delay exist, right? So what I will do is I will add in here delay as a discussion topic. Delay doesn't need to change the turn, order, or initiative. Initiative for the whole combat. Just for 1 round when it's done. Now, the other problem with readied action in Dungeons and Dragons is if you were able to actually just take your entire turn, then the readied action would do what delay would do. And, you know, what annoys me is because they've made the readied action like a partial version of the delay, it's still added a whole lot of complexity and it hasn't given everybody the things they needed. So it still runs into the same problem of making combat confusing to follow or making it longer and taking longer to resolve it. If you're going to get rid of delay, get rid of ready. There's just no point. They should be the same thing. It's basically an interrupt of some kind. So ready actions that are taken on someone else's turn or before them, before them will slow down combat just like the delay action. And confuse. So if you get rid of that problem there and just say delay is like ready is like delay, you no longer have an issue. You don't have to have a delay action. So they all kind of fall under the same sort of thing. I will put delay in here as well. Now, interrupt, delay. I was working on this. I'm pretty sure that I have that in the right place. Yeah, I do. Okay. Interrupt, delay. Right, moving down here. Okay, I think you should still address that D&D was originally a mod of Tabletop War Games. No, it wasn't, brother. I'm afraid it isn't. Chainmail, I think. Well, Chainmail was the combat system they used. That was the... So, first off, Dungeons and Dragons is not Chainmail. Chainmail was the system they used to resolve combat. Originally, Dungeons and Dragons was resolved with scissor, paper, stone. That's how it was resolved. Quite early on, they decided that it needed to be resolved a different way, and they adopted chainmail. But the actual rules for Dungeons and Dragons are not the combat rules. I hate to say it, because most of the rules that were put together and formatted by Gary Gygax were developed by Dave Arneson. And Dave Arneson had nothing to do with chainmail. So he might have played it, but it was just adopted to resolve combat, and he had a lot of issues with Gary about how combat should be resolved. So the progression from there is a little different. So it's not a tabletop war game. Dungeons and Dragons is not. I know a lot of people think it is. I've played tabletop war games before, and I can assure you that it's not a tabletop role-playing game. It's not a tabletop war game. It was designed by people who played those types of games, and who got sick and tired of tabletop war-playing games and made something completely different. That's why Dave Arneson made what he made. So, and that's why Gary Gygax saw the inspiration behind it and wanted to put it down on paper, and that's what he did. Hello, Nacho Man. How are you? How are you doing? So, I'm going to be covering your monster manual for first edition Advanced Dungeons and Dragons tomorrow, 10 a.m. New Zealand Standard Time, New Zealand Daylight Time. Sorry. How's it going, Nacho? Nacho is a patron, by the way. Height, flight, aerial. I think that falls under movement. We've covered movement already. Blocks or simplified units. Yes. You have Colville's book. Oh, okay. He has a war book coming out. Has his war book come out yet? I don't know. I think he's working on his monster book right now. Did he ever do a book on cities? Or was it just strongholds and followers? I think there was another book that came out. I can't remember what it is. I remember the strongholds and followers. There is another book that came out as well. To be honest, one of my quibbles over the various D20 games is they limit how often you use dodge. I wish you could use it more in combat. The D20 AC is the closest I've seen to that. Dodge. Now you're talking about dodge now, and so for me, to give you an idea of how I structured this, you'll notice right here, and I think I've got the right one, basic combat dodge. I consider dodge to be basic combat mechanics. Dodge is basic combat mechanics. So that's already been covered. I haven't put it into complex combat mechanics because I always considered dodging to be something that would be basically something that would be pretty normal that you would wind up wanting to do. If you could not do anything effectively and your best choice was just to dodge out of the way, then that's what you would do. You'd take that as a something to perform. So it's tied in already to what I've done before. Yes, so the dodge action is far more common. You don't want infinite dodge, obviously, but just hard to see it used in combat at all. So it does get used in 5e a lot. If you are, for an example, if you are dealing with dodge, what you would do is you would plant yourself in a choke point, and if you have plenty of armor and you got lots of hit points, you would take the dodge action. And the great thing about the 5e dodge action is it lasts the entire round, which it should. It should last the entire round. There would be no point in doing it. One of the problems with initiative and turn-based games is they help manage the table. The only reason for them to exist is to help manage the table for a game master and other players, so they know who's going to go first, so people aren't talking over the top of each other. But if you've ever seen some other channels, for example, Dungeon Craft Professor Dungeon Master, he gets everybody to tell him what they're going to do, and everybody rolls their dice, does everything, but the order does not matter because everything is going to happen in that one round. So, for example, if you were to make an attack, I think this is how he's described it. It's basically initiative happens at the same time, and that space of time that's been allocated for that round, everybody takes their turn, yes, but everything must happen. So, for example, if a fighter makes a blow with a sword during the first round, strikes, does enough damage to foul the enemy, doesn't matter. The enemy still gets to make their attack. And once they've made their attack, and maybe they've struck at the fighter, maybe they strike down the fighter as well. So at the end of the round, the final outcome whether it's losing hit points or health points, and characters, a character goes down or a monster goes down, that it all happens at the end. All the conditions come through and come into play at the end of the round, so that when we get to the second round, now you see the effect of that first round. Does that make sense? Now, I kind of talked a little bit about initiative when I was talking about basic combat mechanics, which I did last week. And we kind of talked about different ways of doing initiative. I don't know if I necessarily spoke specifically about initiative happening at the same time, just because I don't think a lot of people like that way of doing things, which is sort of a shame, because I think it's actually smart as. It's very clever. Okay, what else we got here? Shiner81, hello Shiner81. How are you doing? Just popping in on my lunch, say hi, but I will be put some time aside for tomorrow's stream. Hey man, it's all right. I won't be a long one. I won't be able to. I have a Game Master Roundtable with AJ Pickett, Wally DM, Dungeon Class. You haven't seen Dungeon Class for a long time. Mark will be there, and then of course we have OKSDM Dennis. We're going to talk monsters, so I won't be able to spend a lot of time on the review tomorrow, but it's all right. It's a short book. Yeah, dodge, save, throw. Yes, absolutely. I usually only see it just prior to combat when you think you're out of combat, but someone is trying to sneak attack or zap you with a spell or land a shot. Okay, a cheap shot. Ah, okay. Yeah, so what I think we probably need to do is take some of these images out that I know I'm going to get myself into trouble with if I use them. Don't need to worry about that. The grapple and grab, I need to actually say this, grapple and grab. I feel like they fall under the same thing. No, grapple, grab, and grapple, grab, and pin. I actually want to say, do I want to restrain? No, I don't want to say restrain, pin. Grapple and grab. No, I think we'll just go grapple and grab. Okay, so grapple. And I'll put an underline. And I will go grapple and grab. I feel like these can go in the same bracket, honestly. We'll go there. Grab. Grab. And we'll come into that in a second. So let me just go back here. I think the image is all right. I don't think that's Wizards of the Coast. Grab and grapple. Grab. And grapple. Okay. We'll go to about there. That's not right. Let's go to there. No. There. Okay, fine. We'll do that. The overlay. It'll work. It'll be fine. So we've got grapple, grab. We'll come back to all of this stuff later. This here is shove. This is why I put a judo throw in here, because I really feel like it falls under this bracket. Throw. Throw. And shove. And we will realign this a little bit later. Actually, if anything, I want to have it less. I've already kind of said a little bit more about it here, and yeah, I'm gonna call this throwing. Just throwing. Throwing and shoving kind of fall in the same bracket as far as I'm concerned. So let's do that. Grab and grapple. I'll just leave it as grapple for now. parry, cover. Where else was I? Let's do here. Cover. Cover. Giant pain in the ass cover. I totally understand it when people decide not to use cover in their games. Do you know why? It's just another headache. Either cover winds up being a +1, a +2, a +5, or something like that. Dungeons and Dragons 5e, it did a lot of things to try to streamline mechanics, and this is one time it failed terribly in trying to communicate the idea of cover. So cover of any kind. So let's say partial cover. That's really what we're talking about. Partial cover of any kind can be represented with disadvantage on an attack made against a creature using cover. Why did 5e never put this in place? Like, all you need to do is you roll 2 dice instead of 1 when you make your attack, because somebody's got partial cover, whether that's half cover or 3/4 cover. Did we really need to differentiate between half cover and 3/4 cover? You roll 2 dice, you take the lowest result. So that would have been the simplest way to get around cover of some kind. Hi Ryan, how are you? I play with my 7 kids and we do combat all at the same time. Everyone moves, declares their attack, PCs and monsters roll at the same time, calculate damage, do so much faster. Yeah, so that works for a person who can do that. I do that because I know I can handle it. But there are ways of adjudicating it and making it work for you. You can still do have all the things resolved at the same time at the end of the round. You can still have everybody take a turn if you think that's going to work. I like the fact that you've said, Ryan, that you have kids and you do initiative all at the same time. They all move, they all attack, all at the same time. Now, I know what you're thinking, people. Hang on, if you move and then somebody else wants to move, what if they're trying to move in different directions? Again, it's not so much the movement that's the big factor. You can still have everybody take their turn in an order of whatever kind to manage the table. But the resolution of losing hit points and what magical spells do to somebody and so forth, they won't come into play until the next round. Does that make sense? So the fireball might go off and hit somebody, but the damage and whether they catch on fire, that gets ultimately resolved at the end of the round when everybody's taken their turn. Does that make sense? Oh, Nacho, yes. Yes, the Game Master Roundtable will be at 2 p.m. New Zealand Daylight Time tomorrow on Wally DM's channel. So I will put up a post for it. I'll let you guys know about it. Don't you worry. Okay. So I've been wanting to say this for a while. There's a few people I've talked to about this in terms of... Now, this is something I want to talk about here. Oh, death saves. I'm not going to call it death saves. Death and dying. Death and dying. Let's get real. Death and dying in the game. It doesn't matter what version it is. Death and dying in role-playing games for 5e, 4e, 3.5, Pathfinder, they all suck. They really do. They either make it too easy to die or too hard to die. and there's way too much to track. So it winds up becoming a personal choice thing about which way of dealing with death you prefer. So I'm going to change the thumbnail, the screen for that. This is cover. We'll leave that for now. That image is Pathfinder. That's fine. That's Wizards of the Coast. That's gone. So death and dying. Ah, come on, dying. Okay. So let's have a little discussion about death and dying, I reckon. I think that would be a good idea. And here we go. Paste this. Placeholder, put an image in later on. Come back to that. Combat miscellaneous. Oh, I need to get rid of this image here. That's got to go as well. We'll come back to that as well. So I'm not going to be working with a slideshow very much right now. These are some of the images I had pulled out for this particular slideshow, if you're interested. They are very similar to the ones I'd used before, actually. So let's go back and kind of pull apart some of this stuff here in the Google Doc instead. I need to take a break, but before I do that, what I want to do is I want to ask you a question about death and dying. How do you prefer death and dying to be resolved in our role-playing game? This is the question I'm going to put up in the chat in a second. Because I'm going to present you with a whole bunch of different ways that death and dying can be resolved in a role-playing game. Now they'll be taken from older versions of the game, of Dungeons and Dragons, maybe a completely different game that you're not familiar with. Like, you know, I'm going to take it from a lot of different places. And my reason for doing this is because it's always the thing that separates game masters, dungeon masters from their players, is how are you going to resolve death, right? Six feet under. Yeah, that's right. Hashtag. So hashtag. How do you prefer? Now, it doesn't have to be based on an existing rule system. I just want to know how you would prefer death and dying to be resolved in your role-playing game. It doesn't have to be the Pathfinder way, it doesn't have to be the 5e way, the 4e way, the 3.5, the Fate way, it doesn't have to be the Star Wars Saga way, it doesn't have to be a particular rule system, just how you would prefer it to be resolved. How do you prefer death and dying to be resolved in a role-playing game? Okay, so this is my question to you. I'm going to take a short break and then I'm going to come back and we're going to work through this quite a lot more. I'm going to be working in this document a heap more than I am right now, just because it's going to be more useful for what we're trying to do. Because then I can write down what I'm thinking at the same time. Kill two birds with one stone. So Arnold will look after you for less than 5 minutes and then I'll be back. Have a think. Okay, have people had a chance to think about how they would prefer death and dying to be resolved in their role-playing games yet? Because I'm going to present you with a whole bunch of different ideas here, based off various versions of Dungeons and Dragons, but other systems as well. So the first one I'm going to present you with is, if we wind back the clock for Dungeons and Dragons quite a few years. You're late to the party, Fred. Well, this is my current question. We're dealing with death and dying. So when you reach 0 hit points, your character's dead. That's it. They are no longer alive. They are dead. They're not dying or bleeding out or anything like that. They're dead. So if you're dealing with death, there isn't a dying aspect. You're either alive or you're dead. There isn't anything in between. Does that make sense? So I'm going to put this forward to you. And for those of you who have got kids, don't run away, because I'm going to put something forward that you may be more interested in. A character or monster who has 0 hit points, hit or health, has 0, I'm going to put wounds, life, hit or health points, is dead. So this is early D&D. There is no state of dying. You are either alive or dead. Now you might say, when you look at this, you think, well, I like that idea, but I think what modern games are trying to do, either alive, try alive, Fred, are trying to indicate that there must be a point where you may be dying. And so 5e, 4e, 3.5, these games, Pathfinder, they're putting this in so there is a stage where you're not dead but you're dying, but you could die if things progress. And so there's nothing wrong with playing this way. Do you know what I mean? It certainly simplifies things a lot. But there is no state of dying. You have one or the other. It means that death can happen much more often. Death will occur much more often. Now, one of the really strange and weird things that happens with Dungeons & Dragons 5e is they have this thing called instant death. And I dislike instant death mechanics in a game. Now, the reason I dislike instant death, not this concept of if you have no hit points or health points or life points or wounds or whatever, you're dead. No, when you take a significant amount of damage, even if it doesn't reduce you to 0, you die. Or if you have a negative point system, which I'll talk about in a second, then it has to drop you below a certain amount to be able to kill you outright, because we run into negatives, and so there's a point where it happens. The reason being is that although it helps duplicate the concept of massive damage, it doesn't take into consideration the abstract nature of wounds, life, hit, and health points in your game. And so, for example, in 5e, if you've ever played 5e, is there anybody here who's played 5e and you're aware of how that instant death works? You have your maximum hit points. Say you have 10 maximum hit points. Can't go any higher than that. If you take enough damage that would put you into your maximum hit points, so negative 10, you are instantly killed by a single blow. So a single blow must do that much damage. The only time instant death actually comes into play in 5e is when you're low level. It almost never comes up at higher level or mid-level play. You're never going to see it come into play at high level or mid-level play. A single blow cannot do enough damage to actually take them out instantly. And so when designers of 5e start going on about, we're trying to make sure that there's more protection for low-level characters when they do some tinkering with the game, stop bullsing around Jeremy Crawford and everybody else and get rid of instant death, because the only thing that it does is affect the low-level characters. It's never going to affect mid-range and high-level characters. So from about levels 1 to 4 or 5, it might affect them. And then after that, it's never going to come into play. Even with critical hits. Even when you're doing double your damage because you struck and you rolled a 20 on a 20-sided dice and did a critical hit, you know, and did massive damage. It never comes into play. So it's a ridiculous rule to have. I know what they're trying to duplicate there, but it's just, yeah, it's a silly thing to do. Next. Ryan, when someone gets 0 or less hit points, they are considered knocked out. When the battle is over, other characters can use some type of antidote healing potion to revive them. One chance to heal. Thank you, Ryan, very much. I really do appreciate you sharing that, because I wanted to talk about that now. If you've ever played Fate, Fate works on exactly the system that Ryan is talking about right now. So I'm going to put this near the front because I like this system. But then there's another system I want to put forward to as well. So I'm going to put, maybe it's not going to be the first one, but it'll be one of them. One of them. Maybe we'll put it in here. It doesn't matter what the order is. It probably doesn't. I'll put it here instead. So when a character has 0 wounds, life, health, or hit points, now this is when a character or monster hit points, the creature or character is knocked out. So what happens in Fate is when you no longer have any life or wounds left, you no longer have anything that keeps you alive and active. You're not dead, because your character doesn't die. Instead, you wind up accumulating penalties that affect you later on. But the concept is you are knocked out for a scene. So it might be that your character can't play in the next scene or encounter or something like that because you're still recovering. It takes some time to recover in Fate. When we were playing Bulldogs, it was like you have to wait a certain amount of time before you can play that character again. So you might have to play a different character, but then the other character would come back into play once they had been in the hospital or had some bed rest, and they were able to come back into play. This actually comes up quite a lot in Star Wars Saga, the role-playing game, because getting hurt and losing your hit points is a big deal. It takes a long time to recover from those. You can't just drink a potion and heal up that way. You have to stick yourself in a Bacta tank, which is expensive. So it's kind of, yeah. So I like this idea. When Fate presented this, one of my biggest peeves with it is, characters can't die. And then I understood why they had done it this way. But it only works for a particular type of person. It works great for kids, where you want to eliminate the concept of death. Okay, introducing children to death in a role-playing game is not a great thing. I know they play video games, but it's not a great thing to be constantly putting in front of them. They're going to find out about it soon enough, I know. It's knocked out till they recover. Recover. Using now Ryan had hit put down here using so this is going to be something like medical treatment, magical healing, maybe it's yes, an antidote, and what else do you have here? Rest time, and recovery, rest time. So this is a good way of doing it when you don't want the characters to die. Is that you fall to 0 hit points or wounds or lives or health points, and you're just knocked out until it's time to come back into play. Now, whether you do that with monsters as well and the characters is kind of up to you. I've put down both because I kind of think it can play into both. That kind of means that you're never really going to be killing monsters and forever, right? But this is just to illustrate the idea. So, Ryan, thank you for sharing that. I know there is a better way to do it, just can't think of it. That's all right, Joe. That's all right. This is why I'm going to present you with a whole bunch of different ideas. No risk of failure equal why do we roll dice? So, Fred, you don't have to roll dice for playing a role-playing game. I know you probably don't agree with me on this, and I know a lot of people don't. But there's nothing in the definition of the word game, and there's nothing that needs to be tied directly to the concept of a role-playing game that says you must roll a dice. Okay, that rolling dice is required. There are plenty of role-playing games out there, and I know the arguments are, and this is just your opinion, people. I hate to say it, but it's seriously, role-playing games, the only reason we have mechanics and dice rolling in the game is because adults cannot play games together of this nature without having rules because they get embarrassed. That's the reality. You don't have to have rules. So you do not have to roll dice for this. It's just a different way of playing the game. It really is. The more I play games, the more I prefer the idea of just being knocked out and don't worry about all the silly mechanics behind negative hit points and health points and death saves and all the rest. The more and more it's appealing to me. So here we go. Okay, so this is... Right, so this is that. Now, this is the other one I want to put down here. How do I want to word this? The three most common outcomes of losing all your wounds, health and hit points will be either dying, knocked out, or death. I mean, those are the three outcomes we're looking at. Yeah. And so there's really, you don't have to have mechanics behind that. You can just say when you have no life, wounds, health, hit points, you could just pick one of those and just say, okay, you are now dying, but you're not dead. You're knocked out, but you're not dead. You could recover from being knocked out. If you're dying, it suggests you might need to do something else. Yes, there might be a bit more required in terms of mechanic behind that. Dead, well, there's nothing we need to worry about that because you are dead. So, like, you know, unless you are able to resurrect people in your role-playing game, it's not going to come into play. That'll be the end of it. But those are your sort of your three outcomes. And you can just stick with, when we get to 0, well, okay, we pick one of those. I'm going to suggest this more and more, is that you just pick which one it's going to be. Whether you're the game master or the players, or you have a conversation, which you should be with each other, players and game masters, deciding on which outcome you would prefer. You might decide that you get to choose whether your character is dead at 0 hit points, or whether it's knocked out, or whether it's just dying but not dead yet. And the only way for it to recover is going to be through some sort of treatment, or some sort of dice mechanic, if you want to use a dice mechanic of some kind. You could just choose one of the 3 outcomes of having 0 health or hit points. Why not? Make it that way. Nice and easy to work out. Next. Okay, overboard. I think there's not a great way, because then does 1 HP or 5 HP mean you're dying? So this is one of the things, is 1 HP or 5 HP doesn't mean you're dying. We're talking about reaching 0 hit points, okay? 0 hit HP. I don't mind a few rounds of saving a dying PC. We mostly use bleeding out when I DM in Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. But if the hit took them to, say, -10, they were dead. So let's talk about negative hit points, because this is the next thing we need to talk about. What Fred is talking about right now is the concept of tracking negative hit points. I think it would remove the ability for the PCs to make saves to get back up. Yes, if you aren't able to get back up because you're knocked out, or you're dead, then of course you're not going to be making saves to get back up. I think they should roll to stay hanging in there. Remains unconscious. So one of your biggest problems by having a system in place that allows you characters to just die but not just be dead at 0 hit points, one of the problems with that is the fact that they can get back up in the middle of a fight when it makes no sense. They just make a critical blow to them that is caused significantly enough to make them unconscious, or knock them out, and then they get back up and then a perfect fighting order again. And so this is why people impose things like exhaustion in 5e, or penalties like a -1, -2, -3, -4 to attacks, or might apply disadvantage or whatever because they got back up in the middle of a fight after going down to 0. Most combats don't last that long. They're not that many rounds. So you're thinking, oh, but the person's not doing anything during that time. Do you know, is it really that rewarding to roll a dice to see if you roll that mighty 20, 1 in 20 chance of being able to get back in the fight, which always disrupts the narrative, right? Always disrupts the narrative. Makes no sense whatsoever. Does it make that much? Is there really any point? I honestly think that most of the time, all it's doing is they roll 1 dice. They're not actually getting to do anything in the fight. They just get to roll 1 dice. I've seen more than a few of my players in my home group. It's just, yeah, I've done it. I'm just sitting here waiting till the fight ends. I don't think it actually adds that much to the game at all. I know people will disagree with me on this. I know there's some people who love death saving throws, but I honestly don't think it actually adds that much to it at all, other than a single dice roll. That means what? Maybe you're stable, maybe you're not. When you could just say you're stable until something else significant happens. But again, when I talk about this stuff, I'm not here to tell you how to do it. I'm just voicing my opinion, and I'm going to present you with negative hit points as another talking point, because that's where I wanted to go. Okay? Because I've used negative hit points before. So these are the 3 things. This is one way of doing it. 0 hit points. And then we're going to go here. I'm going to talk about negative hit points. To allow for a state of dying for a character or monster, if you want. Some monsters you probably don't want to die straight away. To allow for a state of dying for a character or monster, a system of tracking a specific number of negative life, wounds, health and hit points can be employed. And really what we're talking about here is D&D, where is it, D&D 3.5 and Pathfinder. By doing this, this adds a lot of extra complexity in tracking. So adds extra complexity in tracking. Now, if you're fine with the extra complexity in tracking, then you'll use the system. I mean, we used to use it all the time in our games. There was a certain point when you reached a certain number of minus hit points, you were dead, and that was the end of your character, and you would have to go and either make another character, or you would have to find a way to get them resurrected from death, or reincarnated, or whatever it was. So right there is kind of the gist of most of your mechanics. I have included the 5e mechanics here as well, but you could use any of these. And I think one of the things that is really annoying, does anybody remember the fact that you had to track, if you got healed like 5, but you were at minus 9 hit points, if you got healed 5 hit points, you actually had to track, it only deducted 5 of the negatives off the negative. So it meant instead of being back on 1 hit point or on 5 hit points with 5 healing, you would only deduct a certain number of your negative hit points. So minus 5 plus 5 would be minus 4. You're still unconscious. You still needed to be healed more to be able to get back up. It was, I can tell you now, I know some people were fine with it. I always found it a real pain in the butt to do. It's a lot of extra tracking. I think there is something to be said for saying you fall to 0 hit points and you're dying, and something has to happen for you to be able to get back up. Whether that's a dice mechanic, or whether there's some sort of medical treatment going on, or whether there's healing magic, or somebody pumps some adrenaline into your body so that you wake up. I mean, whatever it might be. Do you know what I mean? But tracking negative hit points was always painful in the game. I know for some people it's like it's not an issue because they like complexity, but so I've presented you with 5 different ways that death and dying could be resolved in your role-playing game. I don't know how people feel about it, but I wanted to put it forward. So too many bad rolls still equals death. That's right. And even if you get average rolls, it still means that you're not in the fight. Do you know what I mean? If you just stabilize in 5e, for example, you just rolled a whole lot of dice, but you never got that 20, so you're stable, but you still don't get to do anything. You like the idea of rolling con save, DC 17 or 1 exhaustion from going to 0. So a lot of people used to employ exhaustion if you got up from 0 hit points. Maybe I should add that in as a discussion point because it's commonly used, or a condition of some kind. So let's put this in here. So variant option suggestion. A suggestion to game masters. masters, game masters is assign a level of exhaustion or a condition to characters or monsters that become conscious and continue fighting after falling to 0 hit points. So solution to misses is to assign a level of exhaustion or a condition to characters and monsters that become conscious and continue fighting monsters that become conscious after being unconscious and continue fighting after falling to continue fighting. Okay. Did I need to say that? Become conscious after being the monsters that that become conscious after unconscious and okay. I think that's all I needed to say. I actually had said what I needed to say there, so that's what I wanted to put in there. All right, sorry about that. It just forming in my mind, trying to get it right, and I think I got it right now. So why would we put in a variant role where we give them exhaustion after they fall to 0 hit points and then get back up again, or or give them a condition? Maybe they go one step down the condition track if you've got a condition track or something like that. Star Wars has a condition track, for example, Star Wars Saga. You have a kind of like a condition track in Fate as well. It means that you can go quite a few steps down that condition track, which means it takes longer for you to recover. But they use a different system as well. So if we were doing something like this, what are we trying to achieve by that? One, narratively, and so narratively, it makes sense that someone, that a creature taking a significant injury has a penalizing consequence, and it also stops. So there's another thing that happens with the drop down get back up thing, right? My intention was never to spend as much time on death and dying today, people. I do apologize that we're not spending more time on other things, but since this whole program is set up primarily to have these discussions, let's do that. I will read the chat. I'm just making sure I get this down before I read the chat. Narratively makes sense that a creature takes a significant that has a penalizing consequence, and it also stops the meta game drop and pop back up in battle repeatedly, because it's not really very wise if you wind up with a penalty of some kind when you drop to 0 hit points to continue fighting. Now, I remember in older versions of Dungeons and Dragons, for example, if you dropped to 0 hit points and then you got out of negative hit points and then you would continue to fight, there were penalties in place so that it was made aware to you that you were actually you needed a bit of time to fully recover. That even though you were conscious, you weren't really battle worthy anymore. And what you notice in 5e and even in 4e, it used to happen as well. 4e and 5e are a good example of this, is where you would drop down, and the rationale was there's no point healing you until you drop to 0 hit points, because it just basically means that we're not spending our actions making attacks, instead we're healing you. So we're not going to heal you till you drop, or we'll only heal you just before you drop. And 5e in particular, since there are no penalties for dropping to 0 and getting back up again, it means that my tables had this conversation, and that is, we don't heal anybody unless they drop to 0 hit points. Because if we do healing, then we can't actually use our actions to make attacks. And making an attack is usually what wins a battle, particularly when it's a situation when it's about survival. It's not about performing a specific objective. Like when it's about survival, it's better to just keep attacking rather than to using healing actions. Yeah. So let's go with that. So I see a few things have been written in here. I think the PC's role should be hidden from the other PCs so they don't know if their friends is still alive or not. So Overboard, Joe, we do that at our home table so that the metagame is not in place. So you don't know in 5e when you make a death save, you don't know if they were succeeded, whether they failed, or whether they wound up with 2 failures. The only time you'll know if they were all right is if they, roll a 20 and their eyes pop open and they say something. But yeah, it's a good way of going about it. You're making death saves not to recover. You roll death saves to see if you stop clinging to life. Yeah. The players have to use magic to get you back stable. Okay. I had a healer stop the bleeding, positive stay unconscious. And yes, Fred, in a fantasy world, magic can get you back in the fight. In the real world, no weeks in the hospital gets you back in the game. No. A number of weeks gets you back in the game. So, for example, Star Wars Saga, it would take ages to recover. You would recover very slowly in early versions of Dungeons & Dragons. It would take a long, long time. Hello, Matt. How are you? Just joined now. I don't think there needs to be an official mechanic for flanking because it's so easy to adjudicate on the fly. Either a +2 bonus to hit or advantage is appropriate. Matt, I agree. Do you know, flanking, and this is a reason why I put that question in there. Flanking is really kind of duplicated by the help action in 5e, or aid somebody, or assist somebody. Like where you give them, when you fight somebody, one of the things you discover when you fight in reality is positioning yourself behind somebody and having somebody in front of you, and you're fighting the person in front of you and there's somebody behind you. All you do is turn sideways. That's what we used to teach people when I was teaching martial arts and training myself, and when they taught me, they would teach you turn sideways. And now I can fight from one side and the other, so I can cover 2 directions. It's when you have to deal with 3 different directions that you're a little bit in trouble. The other problem is that unless, even though they're standing there, it doesn't mean they are a threat, because they have to do something. If they don't attack you from in front and behind at the same time, they're not a threat. If they spread out there, if the first person in front comes at you, but the person behind you does nothing, then you don't have to worry about it. But again, all you do is you turn. And of course, 5e does not duplicate, and a lot of games, particularly Dungeons & Dragons, doesn't duplicate turning. So that's why I say flanking is pointless. What I do like about the help action in 5e is it stipulates you have to use your action to try and distract them to give an advantage roll to somebody else. That actually makes a lot more sense. Do you know what I mean? I just wanted to say that because I think a lot of people didn't maybe think of that. If you're a game designer, you probably, I mean, Chris Perkins has done martial arts for years. So you would think he would understand this, but then I don't think he spends all the time on the game mechanics. That's Jeremy. I don't think Jeremy's got any fighting experience. Anyway, James, hello James. I watch a lot, but don't chat much. That's all right, James. That's fine. It's good when you put out in a comment, because then I know you're there, James. Hello, how are you? I really enjoy your clever and sharp mind-making adventures. Okay, creatures and characters. I always enjoy the great ideas thrown out in the chat. Well, great. A very quality channel. Well, thank you, James. So, yes, you're going to find that the Game Master preparation, where we do a lot of that, is going to continue every week. Every week we're doing it. I got a sponsor for it. So, as long as they stay with me, we'll have a sponsor. And when the sponsor, if ever it stops, I'm still going to keep doing it. It's not going to stop, because it's all designed around giving you tools. And I want you to have your own tools rather than have to buy somebody else's. Anyway, you can make your own tools. So thank you, James. F. Hubbard. Make the players work harder to avoid 0, thus avoid the penalty. Exactly, Fred. This is my point. I think you should roll a 20 when you go down. This determines how badly wounded you are. The number rolled is how many failure rolls you get before you die. You can never stabilize yourself. Yeah, so one of the weird things, let's get real, when you look at the game mechanics for 5e and Death and Dying, the fact that you can go from being unconscious and then come awake by rolling a 20 is weird. Like, that usually doesn't happen. When you take a blow that puts you down and you're unconscious, it's, I mean, and short of it being I'm just knocked you out, but which is not what that's trying to duplicate, really. It's trying to indicate that you've taken a really significant blow that's put you down real hard. I like the fact, though, in 5e, you can choose to knock somebody out or kill them with your blow. I think that's nice, particularly the characters against the monsters. Whether we want that to happen with the monsters against the characters, well, up to your table. But yeah, you only roll every turn to see if you stay alive. If you roll a 1 when you went down, you only get 1 failure. You were badly wounded. I think the problem with this is I don't think you need to have a game mechanic like that. This is why I said at the top here, like, you could just have them knocked out. Like, you know, Ryan made the point that the character's never going to die. It's just going to be knocked out. I know you're going to be asking the question, what happens if they take damage while they're down? Well, it's pretty obvious what happens to somebody when they take, somebody sticks a sword in them when they're down. They're probably dead. Would they not be? If you slam somebody with a great huge mace in their head and they're already down on the ground and unconscious, they're probably dead. I don't think we need a rule to figure that one out. I mean, do you really need one? Okay, cover. I want to talk about cover. Let's go backwards a little bit, since we've been spending way too much time on death. Maybe I'll have to come back to these topics again. That's all right. So I've already got the rules for cover in Dungeons and Dragons 5e, which is point 2 here, which I don't like that much. I'm going to put the book aside for a second, and I'm going to grab a different book, and here we go. I want to show you Star Wars Saga and cover, or at least give you an idea of what it's like in Star Wars Saga. So there's the concept of concealment and cover, and 5e has kind of separated them. That creates a lot of confusion. That's not very helpful, frankly. I think there were better ways of dealing with, look, make it one thing or the other. They're trying to give you nuance. That's the rationale more than likely. Okay, so so where are we? I wanted to cover, and for the life of me, I could not find it. Here we go. There's that standard action, swift action, grapple. Disarm. So disarm is something you can actually do in Dungeons in Star Wars Saga, the role-playing game. There's actually some mechanics around doing it. And aiming, catch your wind. Where is it? Cover, recover. There's even a recover action. You can actually try to recover from something, which I always thought was a little bit strange, but it was useful. Cover. Here we go. So cover in Star Wars Saga deals with a bonus. It's a plus basically to with your cover. But here's the issue that comes into play that you're probably already aware of, and that is the size of your cover. Like, how big do you have to be? Like, what sort of size do you need to be to get that kind of cover? And then total cover is really easy to understand. Total cover means you can't be seen. It doesn't really matter what system it is, right? So let's have a look at cover and advantage. Okay, partial cover. Any kind can be received by disadvantage. Attacks. Roll 2 attack dice and not 1, and take the lowest result of the dice. Okay, so that's that one. But before we go here, the one that we are most familiar with is the bonuses. Okay, so numerical bonuses can be applied applied to armor class or defense, when a character or creature is behind partial cover of some kind. And the reason for using the numerical numbers is this is what we kind of did. I mean, it's been around for years. There were lots of +1s and +2s in the early version of the game of D&D, and they transitioned, and those bonuses got bigger and bigger over time, to the point where in Star Wars Saga you could have a +5. You could also have improved cover, which is a +10, which meant you were almost impossible to hit. Do you know what I mean? So numerical was applied on a character on a practical of kind. This could be a +1, +2, +5, or +10, etc. So what's the issue with this? I think the issue was that there were so many different little pluses and minuses. Okay, so numerical bonuses can easily be forgotten, or require more effort to employ in a combat situation. I don't think we can dispute that that's one of the factors, is that it used to take up so much real estate in your brain with everything else that it was easy to forget them. the bonus of using them, so the benefit of numerical bonuses for cover are you can make small incremental adjustments. That's the biggest benefit of using numerical bonuses. Is obviously a +5 and a +10 is not a small numerical adjustment, but a +1 and a +2 is. And often there were so many different numerical bonuses in early versions of the game that you would forget a lot of them. That wouldn't just be the cover bonus, it would be other stuff as well. Okay, so I wanted to mention that anyway. Our jetpack gives us the high ground, exactly. Okay, what do you got here, Fred? Cover stops an arrow, concealment stops vision, a concrete wall provides both, wall of force provides cover without concealment, a blanket on a clothesline provides concealment without cover. Yes, I know what you're getting at, but here's the problem. If you go into too much detail on things, it can get really, really stifling. It's like it can get really, really confusing. I know what you mean, though, Fred, in terms of cover and concealment. I get it. But when you're concealed, you can't really see them to target them anyway. But I'm not going to argue that point. All I wanted to do was present the concept of cover being using +1, +2, +5, +10, whatever it might be. Some of the drawbacks and benefits. Partial cover being employed and just using disadvantage rather than having a numerical sort of number that you have to worry about. It's not so there's not a lot less mathematics going on. It's only plus and minuses you're talking about, I guess, with regard to numerical. But if there are other bonuses involved as well, it gets more complicated. And having played 3.5, we used to forget the bonuses for cover all the time. It used to happen quite a lot. And then we got sort of a mix in 5e of +2, +5, and then bonuses to dexterity saving throws, and it all gets a little bit confusing after a while, if you ask me. But I've put forward 3 concepts there. If somebody's got a better idea on how that hasn't been described here, you let me know. But I think that sort of covers cover. We covered cover. I need to go to work. I need to leave. So we're going to come back to this discussion in about 4 weeks. We'll be talking about complex tabletop role-playing game rules. But next week, since we are rolling around back to the beginning, when I started doing this, rather than having I guess that the question for me is a good question for me to ask you now is, do you want to go in and talk about the nuances of magic again? Because we did that about a month ago. Or do you want me to just present you with a magic system from a role-playing game or a tabletop board game? Because I would be happy to cover the magic system for Hero Quest or Dungeons and Dragons 4e or 3.5. I don't want to do 5e because I've already done that numerous times already, so we've done that a lot. Are you interested in me covering a specific rule system in terms of magic? Or would you like to have more of an abstract discussion around magic and how it's employed? And kind of really what I'm doing is as you might have guessed, I'm throwing out to you various different house rules or different ways of using the game system to you. I'm basically giving you a whole lot of variant rules that you could employ that have been borrowed from previous games or different games. Does that make sense? So we can do that. So you just need to let me know. Use the comments section, use the chat. I will check the chat. I might even run a poll and see how people feel about this. At this point, I would prefer to go over a specific game systems, Magic, rather than just talk about it in general. But I don't know how people feel about that. So we'll see. We'll let you make that decision. Let's have a look at our poll for today. And the question was, once we get it, does combat need the flanking mechanic in a role-playing game? No. 47% out of how many? 19 votes. Yes, 31%. Just watching, 15%. Undecided, 5%. So I don't have Pathfinder, so I won't be going over Pathfinder 2nd edition because I don't have the books yet. You would prefer a specific system? That doesn't mean I won't go over Pathfinder, because Pathfinder is on its way. It is going to be delivered. Agile Monk has actually purchased the book for me and has sent it from overseas because I couldn't get it here in New Zealand. But it's going to take a little while to get to me, and I can't really talk to something unless I actually have a chance to look at it. So I can't do Pathfinder 2nd edition yet. It will come in the future, but no time soon, unfortunately. But yeah, the other systems I just mentioned, I can do specifics. Thank you for that, Major Laser. Thank you for mentioning that. So, let's roll ourselves out of here. And tomorrow, we're going back to Advanced Dungeons & Dragons 1st Ed Edition, Monster Manual. Would you believe it? That's right, the Monster Manual, 1st Ed Edition. So I would like to say a big thank you to my patrons who support me on Patreon. It's a big deal. I mean, a lot of them have really gone out of their way recently, and it's going to change things on the channel in a way that I think can only be positive, frankly. I think you're going to find it's far more in-depth and enjoyable when they are able to widen the scope. We're actually going to probably do a lot more rather than doing the same thing over and over again. And then thank you to everybody who took part in the live chat today, either the poll or commenting down in the comments section, or just watching. Rewatching the live streams is really useful to me too. I really do appreciate that. I know they are long. There are going to be edited videos. I'll put them up probably every once a week, or once a fortnight, depending on how my workload works out. And the shorts videos, you will get some shorts videos. Not that often, but you will get some. I kind of have to do them. So yeah, wherever you are in the world, whether it be the morning, the afternoon, the night, or the wee early morning, please look after yourself, your family, and your friends. Be nice to your neighbours. And we'll talk more about game rolls in the future next week. And hey, till next time, keep rolling those 20s. Or whatever dice you're using, or if you're not using dice, keep playing your games.